people that thought, and this is just trivia, by the way. The guy that wrote The Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum, was actually from the Midwest, and many people thought he wrote the book as kind of a satire about the whole populism thing. Like, for example, there's a lot of symbolism in here, like Dorothy. You know, Dorothy is from Kansas, right? Kansas is a populist state. It's going to be a democratic state. She represents the downtrodden farmer, essentially. The yellow brick road represents the gold standard. Okay, yeah, you with me? The Emerald City represents sort of like this utopia where the gold standard is going to lead to prosperity, you know. And then you've got the wicked witches of the East and the West. The wicked witch of the you know, and basically there's no validity to any of this. I'm just telling you this just because if you ever come across it and you ever watch the movie when you're like totally bored, just know that it might or possibly might have something to do with populism. Some people have even surmised that the Tin Man has something to do with the silver standard. Some people have said William Jennings Bryan even might be the lion. I don't know, okay? There's all kinds of conjecture, you know, historical debate. I just bring this up because it's kind of fun. Yeah, go ahead.
You know what's wrong with that is that the Good Witch is from the north and from the Republican.
That's true. The Good Witch was from the north, which makes absolutely no sense, which might disprove much of the theory here. Yes, sir.
But was she really good? Because, I mean, she pretty much told Dorothy at the end, oh, you could have looked at each other at the time.
That's true. Yeah. That's exactly right. Well, I encourage you guys to check it out. Wikipedia this, check it out. Is that a verb? Okay, whatever. So populism lasted for a little while. You can see the states where populism kind of continued. And it continued to be kind of a political force out west. But it really did die out as a political movement. And but just the mere fact that it was a movement was, I think, pretty important. So that brings us to the second part of chapter 19, which is talking about imperialism. And this is where America tries to become an imperial country, just as bad and evil as other imperial countries. Now, let's see what you know about world history. Who had the greatest empire known to man in the 1800s? Which country? Great Britain, yes. And there were lots of other countries doing this. And I'd like to start out with this picture that I drew. No, I'm just kidding, I didn't draw this. But it's Uncle Sam, one of the boys, okay? And you can see that these guys are playing poker. And Uncle Sam's on the left there, and it's very difficult to see if you're in the back or whatever, but basically the bargaining chips that they're playing for all represents little islands and little places all around the world, such as Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Philippines, and so on. And you've got the other big European countries that are playing poker here, and they are basically playing for control of these areas. And the question is, all these nations have empires. Can the United States have one? And that's going to be a very important question for the late 1800s. Can America play a part in this game? Now, if you look at this map, which is super small, you have to squint. I'm sorry. But basically, the big idea here is that every European nation has taken over most of Asia, Africa. South America is off limits, essentially, because those are all independent countries. And so where is America going to look to try to have an empire that's just as powerful as other nations? And yes, sir.
The Pacific?
Absolutely. The Pacific Ocean is where they're going to look, and that would be a very nice thing to have, of course, because, hey, who doesn't want to have that? No, it has to do with a lot of different things. Let's talk about some of the key questions, though, that hopefully we can get an answer to. I'm going to start off talking about the first question, which is, how and why did America become an imperial power at the end of the 19th century? How and why? Process question. How? Well, through various means, through buying things, territories, through making deals to get territories, or just simply going to war to get territories, or scandalously starting wars. The United States would never do that. No. And another question is, did America use its power in positive or negative ways? You know, as you'll see tonight, you got to question that. America kind of has a little bit of a checkered past, not a perfect past, kind of like Bill Belichick, you know, kind of a little bit, you know, questionable here. But what global responsibilities did America have at this time, and what global responsibilities should America have now? We're not going to answer that. You can think about that, though. As you guys know, America is very much part of the world now. I mean, we're the world power. Not the world power, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, we are. When we come across a certain way, other nations know about it. If we don't respond in a certain way, people think we're weak. You know what I mean? America is that global superpower, and you always got to wonder, when you deal with foreign policy, what should our responsibilities be? All right, I'm going to go on. Another key idea to think about is this called isolationism versus interventionism. Isolationism means, does the United States keep to itself, or do we intervene in other countries? And if we intervene, what are the consequences of that intervention? Why should we intervene? Why shouldn't we intervene? If ISIS is slaughtering journalists over in Iraq or whatever, and they're beheading people, should the United States send in bombs to go blow them out of the water? I don't know. If we do that, what are the consequences? If we don't do that, what are the consequences? You always kind of think about these things when we talk about foreign policy. And all throughout each of these times, is America a force for democracy or a force for oppression in the world? Are we doing the right things as a country? Always got to question that. It's a very important question. I think. Okay. Before 1898 is like the most important year, really, here when we talk about imperialism, because so much happens. In 1898, you have the Spanish-American War, in which America gets lots of territory. They get Cuba, Guam, Puerto Rico. It's like, yeah, okay. 1823, America is not a powerful country at all. It's a third-rate country, frankly. You know, France and Britain just completely outweigh us in terms of military power. And President Monroe, wanting to send a message to the rest of the world, says this. It's called the Monroe Doctrine. It says basically, you know what? The Americas are off limits. North and South America, you may not come in here and colonize anything, because this is our sphere of influence. And we will stop you if you try to do that. It's like a bold statement. Britain and France are like, seriously? You're going to tell us that? Okay, so James Monroe was like, yes, because he was a very small man with a high voice. Anyways, at the same time, as you guys know, America has been expanding, okay? Either buying land with Louisiana Purchase or going to war for land. And these two things, you know, keeping our hemisphere off limits and also expanding and wanting to expand, and why do we want to expand? We'll get to that in a minute, but these two things are kind of like what our foreign policy is like, how America is dealing with other nations. All right, so I'll spend a few minutes talking about why America wants to become an empire. Now, there's probably more reasons than this. These are the reasons why I would say America wants to become an empire. The number one reason is, what do you think? Yes.
Population?
Population. That's a good guess right there. What do you think?
Money?
Yeah. It's not the love. It's not. It's dope. Yes, sir. Power too is related to money. Money and power, kind of tightly related. Yeah. Okay.
More cheap labor.
There's. I'm sorry. What?
Some more cheap labor.
Cheap labor, perhaps. Yeah. Which is related to money. I'm a person. I got to be honest. I think that a lot of the reason America has ever done what it does in relation to other countries has to do with money. And I may be wrong, but I mean, the more I read what our country does, you know, like Obama just lifted the embargo on Cuba, right? Which I think is probably, well, a good thing depending on who you are. But what that's going to do is it's going to bring lots of money into Cuba and lots of trade. There's always an economic, it seems like there's an economic reason behind almost everything. You know, if the United States doesn't want, say, the Ukraine to be invaded by Russia, why don't we want the Russia to invade Ukraine? It's not because we don't want Russia to invade Ukraine, it's because if Russia invades Ukraine, that's another area that they can control, which means that they can control the mining there, the oil, the natural gas, all that stuff. You gotta always wonder, but really, business interests. And business interests have been telling America ever since the Civil War, even before that, like, okay, we got to expand west because there's markets out there that we can sell to, and especially the big market's going to be Asia. So if we can have ports over on the western part of the United States and link them with a transcontinental railroad, you know, okay, there we go. There's a lot of money that can be made. You can see on this graph here, business interests, foreign investments that the United States invests in other countries, very high by 1908. Notice how it's not that much in 1869, 1897. Once the Republicans take over, it's all about expansion, money, power. America's foreign trade increases, our exports increase in the late 1800s. Our imports increase too. America becomes a nation where we are part of a global community. We are an important part of the world economy. Heck, we are the world's largest economy. China's coming up on us though. California, 6th largest economy in the world. We could be our own country. Cool, huh? No water, but lots of money. Okay, number 2. Military and strategic interests. America wants colonies because there's lots of military reasons to have it. Okay? Like if you look at this map, there's a lot of interesting things to point out. One of them is, you notice where most of the territory is that we have. It's all in the Pacific, right? Mostly. Some of it's in the Caribbean Sea, over on the left side, I guess, or on the right side, but a lot of it's in the Pacific Ocean. Alaska, also linked in the Pacific Ocean. And having bases where you can park ships, like, oh, I don't know, Pearl Harbor, perhaps, that's a good place to have sort of a gas station where you can fuel your ships. And one of the guys that was a very important writer that really lots of, and this is big, Alfred Thayer Mahan, or T, Alfred T. Mahan, not Mr. T. Alfred T. Mahan wrote a book called The Influence of Sea Power on History, 1660 to 1783. And in it, he argues that if a nation is going to have power around the world, you got to have a big, strong navy with lots of places to fuel your ships, lots of naval bases. And it's no surprise that a lot of the area that America has is located in the Pacific Ocean specifically for that purpose. Also, another reason to go out and imperialize other nations